So team, when talking about the Google Cloud Platform team, first of all, we have to understand some key pointers on this. Okay. So before we talk about even not only Google, even any cloud platform, the first and the foremost thing which we have to keep in mind is that what is the difference which we are having when we are moving from the on-premises to the cloud platform? Like when I say that I am currently going from on-premises to cloud, what is the simple difference between security, or what is the difference between a enterprise security architecture when compared to on-premises and cloud is the first thing which we have to understand. So the first thing is that team, when you basically talk about a security architecture, as we all know that security is based on three factors, right? Security is based on three factors. That is basically what we call as a CIA. That is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So it's always the CIA. Now, when you basically go to the on-premises, when you basically go to a on-premises data center, we are the one who is completely responsible, or we are the one who is completely having access and responsible and liable for all the end-to-end security activities, or all the end-to-end security deployments, management, monitoring, and everything. So primary focus when you talk about the traditional security mechanisms is that managing our physical infrastructure, then network security, then data on top of it. That means the entire responsibility when you go to a on-premises lies with the cloud service customer, or we can call it as a cloud service consumer, or with the organization itself. And also they are the sole responsible person. Like that means that even though there may be other organizations which can support this company to secure their infrastructure, primarily it's always the organization who is responsible for the entire security operations when you go to the on premises. Also, when you basically go for security in the on premises, you build a network which is more of a perimeter based. Like we create networks, we create some firewalls, we create access control, and all based on some physical servers and physical network devices and all. But the same time team, when it comes to cloud computing, as there is a lot of organizations are increasingly adopting this cloud computing, there is a lot of changes, or lot of shifting of focus happened when talking about the security. And the most important, or the first important thing is that team, when you go to a cloud computing, the most critical thing which we have to understand is that the security focus has been completely shifted from what you are managing in the physical data center or infrastructure to a cloud service provider. When you go to a cloud platform, who is responsible 100% for the physical security of a data center? When you say you're going to a cloud service provider like a Google Cloud Platform or Azure or AWS, etc., who is completely responsible or liable for the data center security and the operations there?
CSP.
It's always the cloud service provider, right? It's always the cloud service provider, because at the end of the day, as a customer, you never have any access or control over it, and it's almost like 100% responsibility of the cloud service provider to focus on, or basically to work on the security and the infrastructure and all. And your focus is shifting from managing the infrastructure and its security, physical security, and all the hardware kind of stuff, to manage your data and applications you're hosting on the cloud platform. So I repeat that point in, that's a very, very important point which we have to keep in mind when you go to a cloud platform. Instead of worrying about, or instead of concerning about, focusing on what infrastructure is, what is the level of infrastructure security we are having, what is the level of physical security we are having, what is the level of underlying infra we are having, we are focusing more on the data or applications and all we are hosting on the cloud platform. So the focus can be more streamlined, specific to our requirements, instead of going for the entire stuff. That's a primary thing when you basically going for a cloud platform. The second most important thing is that team, when you go to on premises, we have a organization there, and this organization is always completely responsible and always completely liable for what? This organization is completely responsible for the entire activities, right? But if you go to a cloud computing team, we have a word called as a SSRF or SSRM. Shared security responsibility model. We have a word called as a shared security responsibility model. Even in the case of security also, certain activities or certain factors always goes to the cloud service provider, and certain things always lies with the cloud service customer or cloud service consumer. For example, let's say team, as we discussed, when you go to a cloud platform, physical security is always responsibility of the cloud service provider. The data center security, or let's say the hypervisor and its security, the virtualization security, the underlying hardware capabilities, and all these things are taken care always by the cloud service provider. And whatever we are building on top of it, okay, as a cloud service provider, whatever things we are building on top of it, and those things which we are building on top of it, it is the responsibility of the cloud service customer. Even though there can be slight changes based on the service models, the responsibilities like shared, and we have some specific responsibilities. So there are, see, now normally when you say there is a person who is trying to go to a cloud platform, we always say a word called as risk transfer. Krish, when we are going to a cloud platform, we are doing a process called as a risk transferring. So in the point we have to keep in mind is that when you say you are going to a cloud platform and you are doing a process called as risk transferring, can you transfer all the risk to the cloud service provider? Can you transfer every risk of your business to the cloud service provider? No. That means what? That means that, so risk of physical security, risk of hypervisor compromised, risk of hardware failure, lot of things you can transfer to the cloud service provider, but certain risk will always be the liability and responsibility of the cloud service consumer. And what is one major risk which always will lies with the consumer? Risk of data security and compliance. Data security and compliance. Data security is something which we cannot, this risk cannot be transferred to a cloud service provider. As I say in almost every sessions I'm having, when you basically go to a cloud platform, whether if you go for a IaaS service or PaaS service or SaaS service, whatever it is, data security will always remain the responsibility of a cloud service customer or cloud service consumer. Then the second thing is basically about compliance. Okay, compliance. So what is a compliance team? Like for example, let's say my company is handling the healthcare data of European customers, let's say US customers. Assume that my company is handling the healthcare data of a US customers. Let's say I run a medical insurance company in a US. So team, what kind of regulation or compliance things I have to comply with? What, which regulation or standard I have to comply with if I am processing some healthcare data of US people? It's a HIPAA, right? It's the HIPAA. So as we have a HIPAA there, so when I am basically going to a cloud service provider, and if the cloud service provider is HIPAA compliant, does it mean that I can skip that? Does it mean I can basically sit in the peace of mind that let them take care of everything? No. So in that case, what we have to do is that uh, even though my provider is certified, there are some benefits we are having, like compliance, inheritance, and all. But at the end of the day, when you basically want to have a compliance, you should achieve the compliance. It's good that your provider can have compliance, but it's very important for that, as a data owner or as a business, you should always achieve the compliance. So like that, when you basically go to a cloud platform, certain risk is always the responsibility of the cloud service consumer, and certain risk is always the responsibility of the cloud service provider. Now, this is a very important point. In fact, I want to focus on team. When you talk about the responsibility of a cloud or shared responsibility metrics, don't assume that like this is a like there is a common diagram which we always say that, okay, Krish, if I go to a IaaS service, these responsibilities go to the cloud service provider, and these go to the cloud service consumer. If I go to a PaaS platform, again certain responsibilities go to the provider, certain responsibilities go to the consumer. Like I always say in all of my sessions team, the most important thing you have to keep in mind is that instead of thinking about the IaaS or PaaS or SaaS, etc., you should always select a each particular service and clearly understand what all things they are going to provide, what all things will be their responsibility for that specific service, and what all things will be the responsibility of the organization. That is a very important point which we have to keep in mind. Okay, that's a second point we have to keep in mind. The third point is that team, when you basically focus on the on premises, okay, when you basically go to the on premises, it's more of a kind of a perimeter based security. But if you go for a cloud platform, it's more of data. Like I'll give an example, team. Now in the on premises, I have some, let's say I have a server here. Okay, in the on premises I have a server here, I have a database which is basically created here, I have multiple stuff like this, and the responsibility of these things always lies with the company. And we are having proper network implementations, we are having proper firewalls, we are having proper access controls, we are having proper monitoring, all these things for the security of the server. But if you go for a cloud platform, the cloud is introducing more and more risk, right? The cloud is bringing one more major risk, right, which is called as the cloud management console. Let me show you an example, team. Now for example, let's say this is my like Google Cloud account here, which you see here. If I basically go to my Google Cloud account here, okay, so I have a server. Okay, I have a server, and you already know that when I basically have a server here on my Google Cloud platform, for this particular server, I can definitely set OS level access control, I can set firewall, I can set access control and all these things. But if there is a person who can get access to this cloud provider's management console, he can bypass all those things, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, team. If there is a person who is able to directly access the cloud service provider's management console, whatever security you have put on the OS level or platform level, it can be bypassed, right? If he's able to get the proper permission. Yes. So what I'm trying to say is that, team, when you go to a cloud platform, the cloud introduces a lot more risk. So our concern there is not only about managing a legacy kind of network. Our concern is more about managing our data, the location of our data, the accessibility of our data, I mean availability of our data and all. And the next important factor is that, team, if you go to the on premises, you have physical servers. You can basically always go for physical servers, right? Even though you have virtual machines also, but primarily you have more and more physical servers there if you go to the on premises, or basically if you go for a legacy infrastructure. But if you go to the cloud platform, everything you are creating is a virtualized things, right? Almost everything you are creating is virtualized. That means if you want storage, if you want VMs, if you want databases, whatever you need, you are getting all those things in the form of a virtualized service. So what is the problem there, team? That creates a lack of visibility. Okay, one major problem we have there is that creates a lack of visibility. How? Like for example, let's say I want to audit my infrastructure, or I want to audit my network. If I go to the on premises, I have a complete visibility and I know that it is there physically. But if I go to a cloud platform, what happens? As things are completely virtualized and they're completely elastic, you are able to create things and you are able to delete things in any ways you want. So what is the problem there? The problem is that the things are always dynamic, and things that are always dynamic makes it less visible for us. Then the last but very interesting stuff is basically what we call as security tools. Let me give an example, team. If I, let's say for example, if I'm going to my on premises data center, normally almost in every cases, even though we will make virtual machines, okay, even though we will make virtual machines, our security solutions are mostly hardware, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, team. Like for example, let's say if I go to my on premises, when talking about network device and all, almost everything we are having will be physical devices, right? Like Palo Alto, Cisco, Juniper, Avaya, D-Link. A lot of things are there, right? But at the same time, if I go to cloud platform, instead of physical devices, we rely on something called as a virtual appliances, cloud-based virtual appliances. What is virtual appliance, team? Like for example, let me show you an example. So if I want to have a Palo Alto firewall, I can just type Palo Alto. Okay, so what I can do, team, I can get the firewalls, or I can get the devices from that particular vendor itself directly. Okay, I can get that particular hard thing from that vendor directly as a virtual appliance. So this is not a physical device. I can basically get that device from them as a virtual appliance. See this, team. Let's suppose that basically going for a router. Just an example. Okay. So what happens? I can basically go for a router here, but this particular router is a virtual appliance. If I basically go for a firewall, what happens, team? I can basically get a firewall, but this will be more of a virtual appliance than a physical device, right? So that way the cloud has changed, or in fact the cloud is changing a lot of things when you basically go to a cloud infrastructure from the on premises. Is it fine that we keep our existing policies, existing security policies, data access policies, and all the other stuff like the same way we have in the on premises when you go to the cloud platform? So not like when you basically go to a cloud platform, what happens, team? All those things like what you have in legacy may not be sufficient enough for the cloud platform, and we should always make sure that we properly change it accordingly as per our changing business requirements. I will give you some examples for a team. Okay, now in fact the reason I'm saying this is for something. When talking about the security, or when talking about any of this stuff, one major thing I always say is that the major reason why the cloud deployment fails in many company is what we call as a lack of a proper cloud adoption strategy. Okay, so when the most common reason, okay, the most common reason why many companies fail their cloud journey is that um, many companies fail to have a proper cloud adoption framework, or we can say a cloud adoption strategy. Either if you go to AWS or Azure or Google or anything like that, there should be a proper adoption strategy for that. And if that is not there, if you have not prepared in fact in terms of your policies, procedures, statements, documents, infrastructure, skills, people capabilities, if you are not prepared for any of these things, team, that definitely bring a more problem to us. So like this is an example for a document which can give you an idea about the Google Cloud Cloud Adoption Framework. It's a really good thing if you want to review it, like just in case if you want to review how we can do it, this is a very good document which you can start.